Hey, welcome everybody to the Inspiration Podcast with Stan. I've got a fantastic episode today. I've got one of my dear friends, Jerry Foster. Jerry laid a truth bomb on me about 15 years ago. Jerry said that life becomes rich when death becomes certain. Life becomes rich when death becomes certain. Jerry was faced with that situation, and not only did it obviously impact Jerry, but it had a huge impact on me and my life. You see, when he laid that bomb on me, it really made me think, why do we wait to get sick in order to get well? Why do we wait to go to the doctor to get that sentence that says, I now need to start to take care of myself? That's when I launched my book, Living a Rich and Intentional Life. That's when I really began to have a passion around transformation and growth. So grab yourself a virtual cup of coffee. Let's sit back and have some fun. You're not only going to hear about those that have cancer, but also the caregiver and what they go through. And it's just a really, really deep and moving episode. So I look forward to this conversation. Let's sit back. Let's have some fun. And now here's Jerry Foster. Hey, I'm Stan Gibson, and this is the Inspiration Podcast. Let's get to it. Welcome, everybody, to the Inspiration Podcast with Stan. I am so stoked. Today's a day that I've been waiting for a long time. I always wanted to have a conversation with my good friend Jerry Foster, and I think that once we get into this, I think you're going to know exactly why this is such a special time for me. But I've got Jerry in the house. Jerry, welcome to the studio, my friend.
Hey, Stan, good to be with you.
Oh,
Even though you're in Florida and I'm still in Iowa.
Well, actually, I'll pull one on you. I'm actually in Scottsdale, so we've got
my goodness.
We've got, we came down here 4 years ago because the twins were born, and I think we just forgot how to leave. And so anyway,
regardless, it's warmer than where I am. So
it's definitely warmer. It's a beautiful day. I decided to throw on the hoodie just for grins, just because I do miss a little bit of the cold weather, but I'll just turn the air conditioner up if I need it. But I don't need to go out, and I don't need winter anymore. And I know you don't either.
No, that's right.
So Jerry, I tell you what, like I said, the reason this is so special to me is because, we actually met a long time ago. I mean, we met probably, I'm guessing, 30 years ago?
At least, yeah. We met, I think it was maybe close to 40. I've been married for 47 years.
Oh my goodness.
So you were in those early years.
Now we're dating ourselves. Now we just lost all the millennials. We lost all the younger people, but hang with us, everybody. We're really two cool dudes. And we were probably in our mid-30s. And I do remember, I think I mentioned through church, but the one thing I really remember was, we were just new to the Des Moines area. And we took for whatever reason, we got to know you and Nancy and another couple, and we took a weekend trip. Do you remember the place we went to?
I do. The Inn of the Six-Toed Cat.
The Inn of the Six-Toed Cat.
That's
it was probably the only house within like 20 miles. And we had enough
Southern Iowa.
We had enough belly laughs that night to last a lifetime.
Yeah. We laughed about you, as tall as you are, in that tiny bed, having to sleep diagonally in that bed in order to fit. Don't know where Sharon slept, but
I don't remember. I just know that the headboard and the footboard were about 6 foot, and I'm 6'6". So I had to figure out a geometrical way to get some sleep that night. But anyway, it was a fun night, and I loved your family. I was in a Bible study with your dad for a long time, who he just melts me to the core. Just such a wonderful guy, and but we had this relationship early on, and we kind of talked maybe, I don't know, two, 3 times a year, but it wasn't enough. And, your wife, Nancy, is such a wonderful human being. And, she and my wife, Sharon, are just, out of the same mold, but we hadn't talked in a while. And in the night that I remember most, because this is where really you stoked my passion for what I do today. You stoked my passion for transformation, for growth, and everything, but it came about in a very different way. And this was I think I just asked you before we got on the air, this was in 2010, right? 15 years ago?
Correct. Yep, you bet. 2010.
And so my wife and I, we were just having a nice dinner, and I tell this story. This is the first chapter of my book, Living a Rich and Intentional Life. And when I do keynote speaking, I sometimes switch around on what my opening story is going to be, but this story is probably my opening story 60 to 70% of the time because it's so meaningful. And my wife and I, we were having a nice dinner and just, talking, and we saw you out of the corner of our eye. You saw us and you walked over, and it was just good to catch up. How's Nancy doing? And, we had that nice chit chat that everybody has. And we just caught up in a really quick speed dating kind of way of 5 minutes. And you kind of walked off. And then about 5 to 10 minutes later, you walked back over and you said, I just feel that I need to tell you this, but I've been diagnosed with cancer. And you said, I have a 50-50 chance of living 5 more years. And that was a mic drop. I mean, when somebody lays that on you, it's like, I don't know what to say. I'm obviously devastated. But do you remember how you approached the conversation after that, Jerry? What you said to us and how that was such a meaningful moment?
I remember because I'd probably been going through it for a few weeks since the diagnosis. It's a very rare form of eye cancer, melanoma in the eye. And 6 in a million people get it. And it has, like I said, a 50% chance of making it 5 years. It's a cancer that never goes away, so you always have it. Just a matter of whether or not it metastasizes, when and if, and it goes right to the liver, which makes it, why it's so deadly. So we were processing that, and one of the things that was happening to me as we were processing that news and walking through it with our family is I began the things that were important in life just all of a sudden became in bright, vivid color. And the things that did matter seemed to just mute out. And as I began to process that and think about the important things in life, just the idea that life becomes rich when death becomes certain. And, death is certain for all of us. We're all going to die. We know that. But when you're given that prognosis that it potentially can happen sooner than you ever imagined, that's when life really just becomes rich in the things that you focus on, the things that become important. So that's what I remember telling you, that
life becomes rich when death becomes certain. Whoa, that is so deep. And that's really what inspired me to write my book, Living a Rich and Intentional Life. And so just using those words and the richness that, you were talking about. In fact, you mentioned once you got this diagnosis, I think your words were, I finally started saying no to the wrong things so that I can say yes to the right things. Well, what were the right things, Jerry? What were those things you started doing?
Well, I started paying attention to the things that really mattered. A lot more family. Figure out where was it that God was really using me, because we get into our careers, we get into our lives, and we start saying yes to everything. Somebody invites us something, we say yes. Somebody has to do something, we say yes. And pretty soon we've said yes to so many things that we really don't know who we are and what it is we really should be doing. And so I think this just gave me pause to step back and say, okay, what do I need to be saying yes to? And I just need to eliminate the rest. And so it's a lot more family, a lot more some of the people that are my best friends, people that I was mentoring, the key people in my company. I just learned to really focus with intentionality, and it was pretty awesome. We went out soon after that I was diagnosed and had the surgery for my cancer. We went out to Colorado with the family, and we went out there, and we. One of my kids was married, the rest weren't, so his spouse went with us. But we were out there and we're sitting around the fire pit. And they all knew the diagnosis. They all knew the prognosis. And I asked this question. I said, okay, guys, if I'm gone in 3 years, if I only have 3 years to live, what do you need from me between now and then? I mean, it was like, I asked that question. And in normal situations, we can ask our kids that, and they're going to say, oh, yeah, why are you asking? That's a silly question. You're going to be around forever. But it was a reality to them. And I said, I don't want you to answer tonight. What I want you to do is I want you to think about that. And then we're going to get together one-on-one. And I just want you to tell me what you need from me. And, I still have the journal where I took those notes. And it was just phenomenal to listen to what my kids needed from me. It kind of shaped what the last 15 years have looked like, because I listened to their hearts and listened to what they needed.
How about your conversation with Nancy?
Well, that was a great conversation as well, because, we had to talk about things like, all right, what's could life look like here without me here? What do you need from me between now and then? I start paying attention to, I need to make sure that she knew where all the passwords were. That she knew what to do, where to go, where all the insurance documents were, and those types of things. And you get caught up in that because your mind immediately goes to all the details. But then that led us to much deeper conversations about what do these next 3 years need to look like for the two of us as well. It was a defining moment for us. Obviously, I mean, something like that does. You can't go through something like that without it becoming a defining moment in your life.
Yeah, you'd been married at that time for probably a little over 30 years, but I've got to imagine the last 15 have been super rich, given the
Yeah,
whole situation.
yeah, they have. The interesting thing, Stan, about it is that you dive into something like that. Like I said, all the things that matter just became like this vivid color, and the other things kind of muted out. My relationship with God just, deepened as I just began to, to explore eternity more intently because it was so real for me. And so my relationship with God was deep. My relationship with my family was deep. But you know what? Life is life. And it's amazing how the further I got away from that diagnosis and the more I began to, so it's been 15 years for me. I've known 4 people that have this, and 2 of those 4 are gone. And so, it's living out its prognosis, in the with people I knew, 50% are gone. But as I began to get past 5 years, past 6 years, get to 10 years, you start to kind of forget. Suddenly the things that were bright color that mattered start to mute out themselves. The light, this vivid picture becomes a little more pastel-y. And then it starts to go black and white, and you just start living life again. And about 5 years ago, so I go to University of Iowa hospitals once a year. And because my cancer has a direct pathway from the eye to the liver, basically they look at my eye and then they do a liver ultrasound. And that's what I do, because if it's going to present itself, it's going to present itself, to the liver most likely, and they're going to find it in their ultrasound. So that's what I do. Well, in 2020, COVID's going on, and it was nasty, over at the University of Iowa. And I decided I don't want to go over there just for an ultrasound. So I said, hey, how about if we skip it this year? Because, every year they'd be great gains. They said, no, let's not skip it. Once you get the ultrasound done in Des Moines, and then send the ultrasound over to us, and we'll look at them. And I said, okay, do that. And so my family doctor, made a mistake. And instead of ordering the ultrasound of the liver, he ordered an ultrasound of the entire abdominal area. When the scans came back, my liver looked great, but I had cancer in my kidney. And so the second place it goes, if it's not to your liver, is to your kidney.
So this
And
mistake
so
was an absolute blessing.
it was a mistake. I can say COVID saved my life, because what they found was it was not the return of the melanoma. After 10 days, well, we thought it was. In fact, I'll tell you this story because it was a spectacular way, timing works. We were all gathering together, the whole family, for Christmas. And Nancy and I were trying to figure out how are we going to tell the kids that the cancer's back, because if it's back, that's not a good thing. And so Nancy and I are going through the same questions and the same conversations that we'd gone through 10 years earlier. And now we're trying to figure out how to tell the kids. And as they were literally arriving at the house, I get a call from, and it's an Iowa City area code. And so I think that must be the doctor. So I go and I pick up the phone, go into our bedroom. And the doctor, the oncologist, says, you don't have the melanoma. That's the good news. You have renal cell carcinoma. And that's another deadly cancer. But the reason it's deadly is because by the time people know they have it, it's symptomatic, and then it's too late. And it's very metastatic, and a lot of people die from renal cell carcinoma. But because of the accident of doing the entire abdominal area, they found it early. So I went in February and had part of my kidney taken out. It was kind of one and done. I'm out. And so, but I had to walk through that again. And so it was just a reminder to me that how quickly we can forget and how intentional we have to be to keep our focus on those important things. And then subsequently, a year after that, I had a back surgery. In fact, I was down in Florida, down to your place down there that you had down there, and staying at yours. And I literally spent most of that vacation flat on my back because I had a sciatica back thing that Nancy had to drive all the way back with me laying flat in the back of the car. And it was so bad that I could hardly move and ended up having back surgery. And as a result of that, I had nerve damage, and then I had a knee replacement, and then I got.
Wow.
And so it's been 5 years, and I'm feeling good now. But I think I've had enough reminders. I'm gonna keep the focus where it needs to stay. Okay.
Well, going back to your original diagnosis after we had talked, now at the time you were CEO of a company that you founded, and I have given a lot of people, a lot of background on you because you were CEO of your own company of Foster Financial. Um, you you and Nancy also were foster parents, and so you also had I'll say a worldwide marriage ministry that the two of you had, you were doing. You were this hard charging guy. I mean, and I think this is your words. Hopefully, if not, tell me if I'm wrong. That you kind of had this need for control. And so, shortly after this diagnosis, how did that change you as CEO of Foster Financial? What took place to start to put things in perspective from a vocational perspective?
Yeah. It's foster group, but that's okay.
Okay.
But we. So it's. I mean, the story of foster group's long, and we don't have to go into that right now. But getting to where I was at foster group is a miraculous story in and of itself. But that moment, I came back to the office, and we were a company at that point, maybe of 15 people, so relatively small, and maybe 15 to 20. But I came back. I remember coming back, sitting in the conference room, and the whole team gathered around, and I shared the news. And at that point, I was kind of the guy. I was the face. I was the guy out, charging around, getting business, and that type of thing. And that changed because I said, you know what? This company needs to survive without me. And what do I need to do in order for that to happen? And I needed to create a company that was not dependent on me or any other one person. And so I really began to reshape the company, rethink the way I was going to build it, and began to delegate and create a team approach. We started selling shares in the company and creating a shareholder model. And I think that experience of I may not be here really caused me to expand my leadership capabilities and to lead differently. And today we have over 100 employees. And I think it goes back to that point where I really had to make a choice. What's the company going to look like going forward?
Wow. So you made some other decisions too. You, I can add to your title, artist. Tell me about that.
Well, so the diagnosis, there's no cure. I mean, they never get rid of it. They said the only thing you can really do, the only thing that's really can fight it is your immune system. And so you need to eat right, you need to exercise, and you just need to figure out how to manage stress. That's the best thing you can do for your immune system. And so Nancy said, you need to get a hobby. And I'm going, a hobby? I mean, I got all these other things. What do you need a hobby for? She said, you need to get something where you just, chill, And so a friend of mine, you may know, Denny Bull. So, but a friend of mine was getting ready to take an art class from this art teacher that was doing these lessons out of her basement. And so he said, why don't you come to that with me? And I said, why not? You've got to find something. And so I went to this art class and I absolutely fell in love with it. And so I go, when I'm in town, when I can, every Tuesday night with about 5 of us. We're all in our 60s, I'm in 70s. We drink a glass of wine and paint and just have a great time. And I do. I mean, that's the one thing I do where time it just disappears, and I don't think about anything. I generally chill out, and so it's been a lot of fun doing that.
So when you say, an artist, I just want to paint this picture for those of you that are listening. So you had kind of mentioned that, you were pretty good at stick figures before this. And I said, well, do you have any of these pictures I can look at? And lo and behold, you got out your phone and you started showing me. And I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, there was a picture of your granddaughter. There was one of, your father, your brother, and his son, and with the American flag. And when I'm speaking and I'm doing, I'm doing these keynotes, I talk about this story about you. And then all of a sudden I put these pictures that you drew up on the screen, and it's just like jaws drop. People are just in amazement. These are pictures, Jerry. I mean, you really did some unbelievable work, and I know that they were meaningful because of, the subjects that you were drawing.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, and they are. The one of my father, my dad was a veteran. I mean, he loved this country. He loved the American flag. He would go and do Boy Scout things where he would teach Boy Scouts or Cub Scouts how to burn a flag that it was all soiled and that, and how to take care of a flag, how to fold it, and all those types of things. And so I wanted to paint a picture of him. In fact, his church had asked me to do one to honor the years of him being an elder at his church. And so I painted a picture of him and my son and my grandson all saluting a flag. And it was, and I called it the 4 generations because it was my dad, my son, my grandson, but I'm the 4th generation whose eyes are seeing the scene. And so it was 4 generations were in that picture. And it was probably the most meaningful pictures I've done because it really had a deep meaning behind it. And I've really enjoyed doing the grandkids. I got the 3 or 4 left that I still have to do that they're waiting for. But they're the hardest because when you're doing a portrait, it's not like just doing a picture of somebody. It's somebody you love and and every little detail's got to be just perfect, or you're not satisfied. So they kind of take a lot out of you to do them, but I love doing it.
I just didn't know people could go from drawing stick figures to this level of artistry. It was just beautiful.
Good teacher.
And I'm sure a little glass of wine didn't hurt either.
That's right. Maybe it was a second glass.
Yeah. So, you mentioned, you had to change your lifestyle. And, again, this was a 50-50 chance of living for 5 years. And here we are 15 years after that conversation we had. So tell me a little bit about, how you changed your lifestyle. And I want to preface this with, we had breakfast or coffee, I'm going to say 7 or 8 years after this conversation. And I wanted to show you all the slides that I use when I speak, when I teach, when I do all this stuff. And you made the nice comment that everything you've got right here is what I'm having to do to stay alive. Tell me a little bit about what these life changes look like from your perspective.
Well, so the most important is the stress management. Just trying to, try to figure out how to manage all the things that are happening in your life. So, I've just tried to take deep breaths and just try to put things in perspective. I think perspective a lot of times is amazing how we can work something, up into such a huge deal when the reality is if we just step back, take a deep breath, put it in perspective, it's not nearly as big as we make it. So I try to be more intentional with that. That's a really important thing. Dieting is, when I say diet, I mean just eat healthy, eat the right things. Cancer feeds on sugar. And so I've not always been real good at that. In fact, just here recently, I've kind of put myself on another sugar fast, because you can just, real easily you venture back into it. But the neuropathy that I have as a result of my back surgery, the nerve pains, a lot of nerve pain is as a result of sugar as well. So I'm trying to get, stay active in that. No sugar, stay away from dairy products as much as possible. I eat red meat once a week. Just some common sense type things. Uh, Exercise. I'll tell you what, Stan, one of the hardest things for me is exercise because when I get up in the morning, it's like my brain is going. I'm ready to get after it. And if I don't do two things, if I don't get out of bed and have a time, with God where I'm reading, studying, praying, and then exercise, if I don't do that first thing in the morning, I'm toast. It's just not going to happen because my brain gets going and I just can't reel it back in. So I have to be really intentional with that. And right now I'm really trying hard in my retirement to just not, and I couldn't do this when I was working. So it's a hard thing, but I find it really making a difference now is I'm just trying not to schedule early morning meetings. That used to be my go-to. Someone say, let's get together and say, hey, how about coffee, breakfast, whatever. That was my go-to. And now, I just don't do anything before 10 o'clock because I need that time. And you'll love this. Some of we may lose some of your listeners or viewers on this one, but I actually have started water aerobics with my wife. And we go over to the health club. It's right across the street. And she and I are doing water aerobics. It's me and I talked my brother into going. So it's my brother and I and 35, women. And we just have a blast. But it's absolutely, it's good on the joints. You can move and work as hard as you want. So anyway, I'm finding things to do that I can do with my wife. So there's a relational thing there. In my book that I wrote several years ago, I talk about the 5 dimensions of wealth, financial, relational, physical, spiritual, and intellectual capital. And wealth is an accumulation of all 5 of those dimensions. I kind of thought about that and wrote about that as a result of, talking with a lot of our clients. I'd say, oh, hey, define wealth to me. And they would figure out all the, their balance sheet, my retirement plan, my brokerage account, all those types of things. I said, okay, well, let me ask it this way. Finish this sentence. Wealthy is the person who, and then just wait for them to finish it. And you'll see them stop and they'll pause, they'll look up and they'll go, wow, wealthy is a person that has really good health. Wealthy is a person that's it's a peace with God and has a good relationship with God. Wealthy is a person that has good relationships. I mean, they'll go right through it. And many times the last thing they'll talk about is financial. And so that's where I just start referring to it as life wealth. And once again, it's life wealth is the accumulation of financial, relational, physical, spiritual, and intellectual capital. And so, to answer your question, what am I doing is I'm trying to balance. I'm in the process of always balancing my, those 5 dimensions of my life. And you notice I say balancing because it's not balanced. Living a balanced life is just, there's no way. You can't live a balanced life because there's always new things happening. It's a little bit like, you remember you're old enough to remember this maybe, but remember, the old days, the Ed Sullivan show for you. Now we're really going to lose your losers here, but you'd have the guy that's spinning a plank on the stick and he'd get one going and then he'd go get the second one going and the third one. By that time, the one on the right is falling. He'd run down, get it going, and he'd get all 5 of those plates going and they're wobbling and, you're gasping as one that'll fall. And that's the picture of what it looks like trying to live a balanced life. Now contrast that with a juggler who's got 5 balls in motion and it's fluid. There's no tension. It's always going. But that juggler has to pay attention to one ball, and that's the one that's in his hand, his or her hand. And as long as he keeps an eye on the one that's in the hand, the others are in motion. Doesn't mean he's not paying attention to them because they're there. But that's the picture of a balancing life. Balancing is always is always a process. And so I think our life is sometimes, balancing might mean that we have to pay attention to one of those dimensions, maybe for a period of time. It might be a health issue. For me, I feel like the last 5 years has been really focused on health. That doesn't mean I took my eyes off of the others, but I had really had to focus on it. And now, that's kind of moving on, and now I can, keep the others in motion. And I think, sometimes those seasons of life can last hours, days. An accountant is focused from January to April,
Right.
but so they're really focused on career right there. But then, and so that's what it looks like. So it's a long answer to your question, but that's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to do is balance my life.
You've always been a mentor to me, and we obviously struck up another very good conversation after my wife was diagnosed. And, she's had cancer for 8 years. And so, we've been in and out of remission. So, you know, being the spouse of the one that has cancer, obviously, you go through, I don't know, you always say this, and I do. I wish it was me, not her. But I want to talk about Nancy for just a second. What do you think Nancy's perspective? How did she walk through this journey with you? How did it change her and in her perspective on life as well?
I've thought about that even more over the last 5 years. You're right. I think the caretaker, it's in some ways, many ways, it's more difficult because they're really out of control. They don't have any control over how we're dealing with it, how we feel about things. So they're watching our emotions go while they're dealing with their own. And when you're in the middle of it, I mean, it's really easy when you're in the middle of a health crisis to be pretty self-centered. The last 5 years, with all the things I've been through and now finding myself in chronic pain and trying to figure that out, it's been in recent months that I just really realized how hard these last few years have been on her, because she's had to watch me go through it and talk about it and process it. And so I think it's really, I think it's the impact on her has been probably a different journey to her own sense of contribution and her worth and her, I mean, the things, the way she's been able to serve me, she's done it wonderfully without complaint. And I think that her growth in learning how to serve has been remarkable, and I think we all get opportunities to be served and to serve. I think both of those have unique outcomes and things we learn. And so I think she would probably tell you that.
Yeah, well, Nancy is remarkable in the first place. So 2xing that's quite the thought. She's such a wonderful person. When I talk to people, when I'm on stage and I talk about this, because you're right, being the caregiver for me, it made me realize that personally, I actually need to become more selfish. And what I meant by that, and what I do mean by that, is I started getting up earlier. I started taking care of myself. I started working out earlier. I started praying earlier. I started, going through my morning routine and just putting so much more emphasis in the first 2.5 hours of my morning, because I wanted to put the energy into me so that I could give the next 10 to 15 hours, especially to her, priority number one. But like you, I was in the corporate world at the time. I was on boards. I was, traveling. I was doing so many different things in life. I couldn't take care of the most important things in my life if I wasn't taking care of me. And so it's always been kind of just a lifestyle that I have adopted. And I always tell people, you have to be a little selfish to be a servant leader. You have to take care of you in order to take care of the most important people and things in your life. So I'm sure that, that's probably similar advice you would give to any other caregivers out there right now.
Absolutely. I think that's so critical. And I wish that I had been more attuned to that, to encourage Nancy to do that. But once again, when you're in the middle of that,
Sure.
you kind of become self-centered and, but yeah, I think that's great advice. And the other thing I would encourage any caretaker to do, to go get counseling, to find a care, a support group that you just kind of hear stories or get, suggestions on how to do that without becoming, and once again, Nancy didn't do this, but I think it could be really easy as a caretaker to gradually let bitterness, anger,
Mhm.
frustration just well up, and then to feel guilt for that because you don't want to feel that way, but your natural human nature is to feel that frustration. And so I think getting somebody to just help you walk through that is really important.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. We're all wired very differently, and I give a lot of my clients Enneagram. I give them Clifton Strength Finders, and
Yeah.
I think just knowing the wiring is probably going to predict as to how you handle it. I'm a Enneagram 7, so to me, I don't deal with pain very well. I'm somebody who probably romanticizes the future because it's a little it's out there, and there's nothing to do but fantasize about it. So dealing with reality can be tough. And so for me, I know that I personally have had to work with certain people to change my outlook on life. And, I come from now a place where I have a mantra that I say in the mornings along with many others, but, I embrace living, dying, death, and living in eternity with Jesus Christ. And it's a mindset of not I'm going to, it's a mindset of I do. I embrace living. Living. Right now we're living. I embrace dying. Dying is different than death because dying there can be, like you said, a 10 to 15 year, 20, 30, however long, you go through this process. But being a caregiver and even as you the one who has cancer, dying is different than death. Death is finality, and then living in eternity with Jesus Christ is a decision. So I've had to do this work mentally to deal with the present, to deal with the ability to get past the reality that this is life. This is what happens.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. And there was a song, I can't remember who the famous country singer wrote the song, living as if you die, or I can't remember
Yeah,
who
yeah,
it was,
yeah.
but yeah, you see, you say it, I'll remember. But
He's
anyway,
he's married to Faith Hill, and I'm
oh
thinking of it,
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But anyway, so in the first few years, first couple 3 years, that was kind of I was living as if I was dying. And there's a good thing about that because you're like we just talked about, you focus on the right things. And so and Nancy and I together, we talked about that. We're going to live life as if we're dying. But then there was a certain point in which we kind of got exhausted from it. And we thought, let's stop living as if we're dying. Let's start living as if we're living. And so, I mean, it literally was a conversation, a crossover point where we were exactly what you just said. If we thought, okay, we're done with that, we understand it, we know we're going to die, but let's start embracing life today for what it is and start living as if we're living.
Yeah.
And that was a huge transformation for us in that process.
So Jerry, again, that was a just a mic drop moment. 15 years ago, you're here talking. 15 years later, you're going strong. What advice do you have? Because again, you were in your mid 50s at the time. And, again, you had, the world ahead of you. In fact, I remember a conversation we had many years ago. And when you had turned 50, you were working on a life plan for the next 50 years. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
you were working, you said, I'd finished the first 50. Now I'm doing a detailed strategy for the next 50, which I thought was so cool. What advice would you give Jerry today with all the experiences you've had? What advice would you give to yourself if you were still in your late 20s, 30s, maybe when we just met in your early mid 30s? What advice would you give to you?
Yeah. That's always an interesting question because, because I've been asked that before and I've thought about that before. And you want to give advice, but you have to recognize that we only know what we know then, and we only can take on because you can tell a 30-year-old or 20 or whatever age it is, what your experience as a 50-year-old, and they'll listen to a certain point, but they have to live life too. We have to live life and get to those places. So it's always a hard question, but what I would probably tell myself is, the Bible's full, Proverbs is full, the encouragement to seek wisdom and seek understanding. And I think if I would encourage myself to be so intentional to seek out wisdom from people, from experiences, to seek understanding, because we live life, or we go through all these life experiences, and we if they're experiences that are hard, what we want to do is just get through it, because we don't like pain, we don't like suffering, we don't like not feeling good things, and so we want to get through as quickly as possible. If they're good experiences, high five, let's move on, let's get to the next one, and we don't really take the time to really absorb what we've learned. And so, I've taught on this since then, about this whole, and I know you do some teaching similar to this, about an experience portfolio. So everything I did was kind of in the context of a financial metaphor. I get the 5 dimensions of wealth. That's, we've got an experience portfolio, and that experience portfolio is, we make deposits into that, and we build equity in the form of wisdom, insight, knowledge. And the way we make those deposits is we live life, and we have those experiences, and what did we learn from that? And we deposit into that, we create that equity, so that at some point we make withdrawals, either to go back in and learn from what we learned, to grasp the wisdom, or to invest in other people. That's how we make great board members, great mentors, great, patriarchs of our family, is that we're making withdrawals from this experience portfolio. But here's what I would encourage myself to do, is to don't let those experiences go by. I've walked people through the exercise of going back and saying, okay, remember everything you can from growing up. What are the defining moments of your life? And just, pick out those defining moments, and then to say, okay, after you've gone through those, pick out the top 10 that you think absolutely decisions that were, or things that happened that shaped who you are. And then I have people kind of draw a line across the paper, and then to plot those things from birth until now to present, plot those either above the line, below the line. So if they were a positive experience, plot them somewhere above the line. If they're a negative experience, somewhere below the line, and degrees of negative, degrees of positive. And then when you're all done, you're going to have this map of your defining moments. And then what you do is you go back and say, okay, what should I have learned, or what did I learn, or what should I have learned from those? What's the wisdom I should have gotten from that? And I call that reclaiming equity. To go back and capture those moments, and to say, I remember when this happened, I just got through it, but now that I think about it, it shaped my life, and here's what I learned. And you literally take that and make that deposit, because all of our life is about living life, learning from it, and then passing it on to others. And so I would tell myself to embrace those moments. And then here's another thing I would say is, remember, you go through the Old Testament, and it's filled with all these times where, as the Israelites would travel, and they would stack these stones and then remembrance of something, and they were monuments to remember some way that God had shown up for them, or something that had happened. I wish I would have been more intentional to remember. We were just with our kids, our 4 grown kids, for our 70th birthday. We spent 4 days together, without spouses, without grandkids. The spouses all endorsed this and want us to do this. We spent 4 days with them, remembering back. Was the answers to both our 70th birthday, remembering back some of our life experiences, and just celebrating together. But I put all of our old home videos on I had all transferred onto the thumb drive, to a flash drive, and went down. We plugged that in the TV down there, and we watched every night a few old videos, and we laughed and we remembered. And as I remember them, I'm thinking, why didn't I remember that throughout? Why does it take a video to go back? The video is my monument. But I would tell people, remember. I tell that whenever I'm talking to a newlywed couple that are getting married, I say, on your wedding day, take the time, stop, take a snapshot in your eyes. I mean, just scan the eyes. Remember who's there. Remember what it looks like. Remember how you're feeling at this, because if you don't, it'll go by so quick, and you'll look back on that day and think, what happened? And I think that's what we need to do with our life, is remember.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, I'd looked at I've looked across my life, Jerry, and, the toughest, most challenging times I had, I was just being shaped for the next chapter. I wouldn't change them. I wouldn't give myself advice to not go through those hard times because I think those hard times is what eventually makes you happy. And without being shaped and molded and going through that, you don't learn. And that's one of the things that I talk a lot to people about, artificial intelligence. There's so many things out there right now that we just get the quick answer and we don't take the time to be challenged. We don't take the time to learn and to make mistakes. And so, the mistakes I made are absolutely gold, although they weren't at the time.
Well, and I would say this too, Stan, and we don't take the time to celebrate either.
No.
And so when I'd have people do that chart, almost always, very seldom done that, but almost always, when people look at the defining moments, they're almost split in half. Half of them are above the line, half of them are below the line. We learn from our victories, we learn from our defeats. And we need to look at the lessons from that. Celebrate and learn.
What a mic drop. What a mic drop. Jerry, I love you, buddy. This is such a deep conversation for me because of, how it shaped my life, for the 15 years since then. And again, I didn't know at Wells Fargo that, my days were going to be limited. And again, because of our conversation, it helped me start the day after with purpose and with meaning and with drive, just because I started realizing that life becomes rich when death becomes certain.
And
And
Stan,
that is so strong.
and I need to tell you something too. So I'm going to tell you this right on camera. I don't know if many people tell you this, but you know what? I follow you on Instagram. I get, watch your videos and follow your posts and so forth. And read your book. And I just want you to know, I'm proud of you because
Thanks.
you really, you decided you were going to do something. And I've not seen many people go out and do what it takes to do what you're doing. And so I'm not that much older than you, but I'm enough years older to say I'm proud of you. You're doing a great job.
Well, thank you. My wife calls it my ministry, so it might take us down, but it's something that, again, servant leadership is what it's all about. And that's who you are, my friend. So we're going to wrap today up, but I tell you what, Jerry, if for some reason somebody does want to get in touch with you, do they get in touch with me? Do I become the intermediary or can they get in touch with you direct? Do you have any advice?
Oh, sure. They can just, they can email me. I'll give my personal email. It's jerry.fos55@gmail.com. Shoot me an email. Love to connect.
It'll be some of the best wisdom you ever get, my friends. So please reach out to Jerry. Tell Nancy hello. Again, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for what you've meant in my wife and I's life. And until we all meet up again, may you all live a rich and intentional life. God bless.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to today's episode with Jerry Foster. Again, life becomes rich when death becomes certain. Life becomes rich when death becomes certain. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. This is really a deep moving one for me, again, with the impact it had on my life and what it caused me to want to do to start to help others as we go through transformation and growth. How do we take care of ourselves? Emotional intelligence, well-being, productivity. I still think those are the three pillars that not only move leaders to becoming better coaches, better at home, better at work. I just believe that it's the foundation for leadership and transformation. So anyway, hey, I'll tell you what, I've got two tools that are my most requested tools for helping leaders go through the journey of leadership. If you go to leadwithstan.com, I'd love to be able to go ahead and send these to you. And I'll tell you what, you're going to find these really unique. Again, they're my most requested tools, and I just love to give them away because, hey, that's what it's all about, transformation and growth. Anyway, thanks for listening to this conversation today with my good friend Jerry. May you all live a rich and intentional life. Well, that's it for today, my friends. I hope this conversation sparked something meaningful for you. If it did, share it with someone who could use a little inspiration too. You can find more tools, stories, and coaching to support your journey at stangibsonspeaks.com.